Hello, this is my vision statement as an elementary school teacher by Kathy Bourne for SPF 301 Fall 2019. Types of learners and hidden curriculum. As a teacher in an urban or low-income school, I will come to understand the needs of each of my students, not only in regard to their education, but to the community from which they come. I will develop curriculum that addresses each student individually while being cognizant of how I address hidden curriculum through messages sent through the administration. I have been fortunate to be a substitute teacher in a rural Missouri public school. My little school has 102 students in grades pre-K through 8th grade. Most students live in the small area of Leesville where poverty is high and the conveniences of bigger towns, such as broadband, libraries, and extracurricular activities, are difficult to bring. I often wonder if the students at Leesville can learn well at school, or if school is just a place for them to go to find a place of community with peers. While small rural schools do allow for a sense of community, the idea of school, or if students gain an education to allow them to propel themselves out of an area with few job opportunities, or areas where they may be able to find a job with a living wage and benefits. Students' cumulative years of schooling have a major impact on earnings and other metrics, Lowry tells us. So the time I spend with each student has a direct impact to their overall success. In so many schools, most particularly low-income schools, the easiest path towards getting students onto the next grade is through teaching all of the students all of the same thing with little to no personalization. As teachers, I believe it's our job to look towards the future for our students and with our students. We must act as a partner to each one, making them feel vested. In order to help our students discover education as a teacher, I can promote discovery as an intriguing process, as Edwards tells us. In my classroom, through innovative techniques being taught through various universities, including my own. Most important to me is how I come prepared to teach my students. My attitude towards my work can be strengthened while working within a school culture that promotes what and how I am attempting to teach. A recent study provides information on the importance of how organizations I teach and direct affects me as a teacher in statistically verifiable ways. Next is our learning the environment and the concepts of space, place, and material culture. As a teacher in an urban school, my classroom will be reflective of the culture of the students who will spend their day there. I will incorporate a mix of flexible seating, tech and library centers, and art that is reflective of the students themselves. As a substitute teacher, I have been lucky to be in a lot of different classrooms and see how different teachers arrange their learning space. The classes where I have seen flexible seating used always seems to be the classes where the students seem to be more engaged in their learning. Flexible seating allows students to be comfortable in a space on any particular day. A community table will allow my students to work together with their peers in a collaborative manner. And of course, those students who have issues with focus will be able to move from place to place within reason. Schools should always look at their spaces both internally and externally to make sure that students' learning has been positively affected by it. When school administration and teachers look at the details of the building, it speaks volumes about attention to their children. Urban schools, many of which are old, feel the pain of budget crunches profoundly. Urban students are aware that there's an equity in the physical spaces where they go to school in comparison with more affluent schools. An outcome in Tippmann's research was that many schools which had developed their grounds reported that in addition to obvious and tangible benefits and improvements, the process in itself seemed to cause significant changes in relationships, attitudes, and behavior. Classrooms do need to be focused on educational outcomes. A recent study found that when kindergartners were taught in a highly decorated classroom, they were more distracted, their gazes more likely to wander off task, and their test scores lower than when they were taught in a room that was comparatively less decorated. Next is the achievement gap and cultural bias. My classroom will be a place for students to have access to educational opportunities that rival the best schools in the nation. My goal will be to assure that my students are prepared academically for future educational and career journey. I will create a classroom where I incorporate the diverse cultural aspects of each of my students, as well as encouraging my students to be cognizant of the various cultures that surround them daily. Achievement gap is best described as the differences between the test scores of minority and or low-income students and the test scores of their white and Asian peers. Educators additional concerns about the achievement gaps between girls and boys, English language learners and English speakers, and students with disabilities and their non-disabled peers. Achievement gaps can be explored through using standardized testing, opportunities to academic options, and graduation rates. Closing the achievement gap is achieved when students are given opportunities and when they are put in rigorous course offerings. When low-income students are removed from the traditional tracking or are, quote, detracked, unquote, it becomes clear that they have higher rates of academic success. Detracting reforms are grounded in the established idea that higher achievement follows from a more rigorous curriculum and that low-track classes with unchallenging curricula result in lower student achievement. Class sizes have also been shown to be a cause of the achievement gap. In our class lecture, Project STAR was an experiment in reducing the class size. When students were placed in smaller class-sized rooms, an improvement in academic achievement was found. For example, there was an 8% increase in college entrance exams by Black students who were in the smaller classes over those who remained in regular-sized classrooms. As a future teacher, my goal is to make sure that I am teaching to all my students. Anecdotally, as a current substitute in a rural school, I see the expectations of my students and their parents tempered with the knowledge that affluent schools have better access to the technology and materials that provide better education. I truly believe that educational quality should prevail in every public school classroom, regardless of location. Next is cultural conflict and culture as a disability. I will develop an understanding of the cultural norms of each of my students by understanding where they come from and how they best learn. My classroom will be a place where each student will feel encouraged to share their culture. The culture as disability is a somewhat difficult concept in that it does not require that a student be disabled in the way we normally think of. A student who is unable to speak the dominant language of the classroom may be perceived as being disabled, but is unable to take part in learning experience due to the lack of understanding. They are unable to test because since the tests are being given still focused in English competency, the student would fail. Often students who are unable to find success in school or who are unable to participate in academic endeavors due to the inability to follow certain expectations prescribed by the school's culture. As a teacher, I believe it's my responsibility to understand what cultural definition each of my students brings with them. I found this an excellent way to think about culture as a disability from a teaching perspective. Students and people in general only appear to be failing because of how society measures them, as found in cultural as disability, or how the teacher may measure them. McDermott and Varand write that when culture is understood as the knowledge that people need for living with each other. Finally, is rituals. My understanding my students' uniqueness, both culturally and academically, I will make my classroom a place where rituals add to their learning experience. It is important that I teach my students how they can identify the rituals they find help them feel confident and encourage them to practice them. Every school has its own unique rituals and procedures. Some of those may include a vision and mission statement that allows teachers, students, and parents to focus their educational goals in a specific way. An example might include a school that each day says a pledge to work hard and be kind. This mission statement or pledge allows the student to develop more than academic skills, but skills that allow the school community to prepare for standardized testing goals, for example. Adhering to this pledge is something that is incorporated into daily activities both inside and outside the classroom. Teachers often develop their lesson plans and classroom goals around that same vision. It is suggested that schools in which socialization projects are conceived of as having fundamental importance for the overall educational project. Schools develop themselves around socialization or ceremonial type projects, almost developing certain ideologies. And how a school practices its own socialization depends also on the values and norms of the school culture. In my classroom, an understanding of the importance of ritual to the school community is important. I need to be aware of the cultural differences of my students and understand their diverse learning styles and putting those together to make classroom rituals that will not allow conformity, but will allow each individual student to use those rituals attained as they move through their educational experience. Lastly is multiculturalism. My classroom will be a place where students will be able to learn in a way that recognizes their culture. I will seek to gain a respect for each student and learn about each one. They will be taught so that they are able to achieve academic success. My classroom will also be a place where each student will gain an appreciation and respect for the cultures of their peers. With each student comes their own culture. With that culture comes the ability to learn. As a teacher, it is my responsibility to know my students and understand where each of them is coming from in regards to their culture. Students have the best chance of academic achievement when their education is culturally based. Again, the cultures of my students are important for me to know and to understand so that I am able to present this information to them in a way that allows them to be successful. Teachers should not base their opinion of a student's learning ability around stereotypes of one's culture.